Hi there, my name is Brian Harrison and I am a Cloud Solution Architect with Microsoft, and welcome to the Azure 101 series. In this video we're going to be focusing on the Azure CLI, which is the command line interface. I will be providing you with a link for where you can download it and therefore install it onto your own system. Now the Azure CLI can be used from any command prompt like you're seeing here. You can do it in a normal command prompt, you can do it inside of the integrated terminal inside of VS Code, or you can of course use it inside of Azure Cloud Shell, which is what I showed in my previous video. The difference being is if you do it from a command prompt or the integrated terminal, you are going to be requested to authenticate, which is why I'm showing you this particular process so that you can see what that actually looks like. So I'm going to go here up to my command prompt and type in AZ login. Now the Azure CLI is a set of commands that build on top of one another, with AZ always being the starting point representing Azure, and then you build from there where you put in a resource type, then you put in a command or sub resource type, and then command, and then you put in all of the necessary parameters. And you'll see exactly what I'm talking about as I show this to you. But you're going to have to start off with AZ login, at which point then you're going to get a message back stating that you need to go to this URL here and type in this particular command, this particular code. So if we go to aka.ms.device_login, it will then ask you for you to put in your code. Let me make sure that I get that copied. And then you'll go ahead and get a continue prompt validating that you are going through the command line interface, and then you can go through the process of actually logging in as if you were going to the portal or trying to authenticate in any other way. Now I've already logged in with a valid user ID, so as soon as I clicked my user ID, it had used my stored session token and has already authenticated me. I should now be able to go back over and can see that I have in fact authenticated against two specific subscriptions, with one of them having been set as default, which you can see here. Now, as I said, the Azure CLI builds on top of itself. So if I just type AZ, the great thing about the CLI is the amount of documentation that it provides within itself. So at any point in time, if you are not sure of what commands are available, what parameters are available or are required, you can actually put in an empty command and you will get text back in either an error form or in a view like this, where you're getting a full list of available commands. Now, starting from AZ, it's giving me the list of all of the resource types that are currently available inside of my version of the CLI. And you'll see all kinds of different things here: Azure Backup, VMs, storage, SQL, Postgres, MySQL, Key Vault, all of the different types of resources that you can think of. But then there are also sub-resources off of some of these. For example, off of network, there are load balancers, there are NSGs, there are NIC cards. All of those things are considered to be sub commands or sub resources. So if I go to, say, AZ Network, for example, I then get an error message with a listing of all of the available sub resource types: Application Gateway, Express Route, NIC, NSG, public IPs, route tables, route filters, so on and so forth. You then would go AZ Network VNet, for example, and the clicking on that would then give me a list of commands as well as subtypes of the VNet. So you can see here I do have access to the subnets, which is considered a sub-resource type of the virtual network, but then I have the ability to create a VNet, update a VNet, set peering for a VNet. These are then commands for actual virtual networks. Subnets are the only sub-resource. And you will find that once you get to a resource that you want to actually create, update, or delete, you will then see the list, the show, the delete, the create, and the update. Those are going to be the common commands that you're going to see. But the great thing about the CLI is you don't have to know it right off the top of your head. The documentation has been designed in such a way that it's built right directly into the interface so that you can very easily learn as you're actually creating your commands or creating your scripts. Now, of course, over time, you will learn what parameters are available, which ones are required, and actually let me show you that very quickly. In addition to seeing commands and sub-resources, let's do AZ network, VNet, create, and then click enter. And in this case now, I'm going to get a list of both required and optional parameters that are available for this specific resource creation. You'll first get the fact that the following argument is required, resource group, as well as name. Those are going to always be the required parameters. But for anyone who's created a virtual network before, you know that you're also going to be required to put in an address prefix and a initial subnet and subnet prefix. The rest of the items will actually come in as optional. So for example, the location, it will default to whatever the resource group is in unless you specify it otherwise. The DNS server, for example, that is listed right here, that one will default to Azure DNS rather than a DNS server that you're specifying. So you do have the ability to learn what parameters are available, which ones are required for a given command based on whatever particular resource you're trying to work with. Azure CLI is extremely easy to use. Because of the way that it was designed, if you were to ever want to create a shell script with multiple commands within, you are going to need to create shell scripts or bash shell scripts that then contain the Azure CLI commands. So you're going to need to follow all of the semantics from bash shell scripting in order to create those. For example, I've created some, and you can't have spaces in most places. You need to make sure that you're using either single quotes or double quotes. You actually can't have extra lines. Things along those lines. Making sure to understand what your commenting needs to look like with respect to a bash shell script. Let me switch over very quickly to VS Code, and I'll show you what one of these scripts actually looks like. Instead of going to VS Code, I actually went into a GitHub repository that I have available for some scripting that I wrote for a publishing company. And this is an actual shell script that I created. And this one will create a new virtual network. It will create a couple of public IPs as well as some load balancers, and then apply the public IPs to a couple of those load balancers. It also makes sure to set up the additional subnets beyond the base default one. And as you can see here, it's a fairly straightforward set of CLI commands. I do have some extra line breaks in here, but you'll also notice, for example, I don't have any spacing between any of the pieces other than the Azure CLI commands, which do in fact require spacing. And I am using variables as well to be able to pass things around, therefore allowing you to download this and make your own modifications. So it's fairly straightforward in order to create Azure CLI. And then, as I mentioned, you can use the Azure CLI from a command prompt, the integrated terminal in VS Code, or of course inside of Cloud Shell in Azure Portal. And I actually recommend either using VS Code, because VS Code can allow you to integrate with Git repositories, or Cloud Shell, which of course can also do the same, but keeping in mind that one requires authentication, the other does not. So with that, hopefully this gets you started using the Azure CLI. I am a very big fan of the CLI. It is very easy to use, and I find it much, much easier to use than PowerShell. Although I will be providing a 101 on Azure PowerShell as well. So hopefully I'll see you in a future video.